The Apostles' Creed is widely used among Christian believers across many denominations. There are many recite it almost every Sunday, and many see it as a symbol of faith. It is, however, very Trinitarian, but most of it is historically accurate. There's one phrase in the middle of it that reads, "He," referring to Jesus Christ, "suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead." The idea behind this phrase is that Jesus Christ died and was buried, and during the 3 days and 3 nights that he was supposedly dead, he descended into hell and preached to those who were there. This is taught and believed by millions of people, but this is wrong. This phrase, "he descended into hell," comes from the twisting of scriptures, such as Ephesians 4:9, which reads, "He also first descended into the lower parts of the earth," referring to the grave. Or 1 Peter 3:18 through 20. And we'll turn there. So please turn to 1 Peter 3. Now this passage, Expositor's Bible Commentary says this section contains some of the most difficult exegetical problems in the New Testament. Commentators struggle with passages like these because they have their own ideas of salvation and the plan of God. So 1 Peter 3, starting in verse 18. "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. By which also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 lives, were saved through water." So what's going on in this passage? Who were the spirits in prison? When and where did this happen? What was preached? We're going to look at these questions today. So first, who were the spirits in prison? These were the angels that rebelled during the great rebellion of Satan. And there are 3 reasons why this refers to the demons. First, they were spirit beings. The word for spirit is never used of human beings. Many in the world view this as Christ going to preach to those who've already died and were in the grave. They believe that Christ descended into hell and preached to the immortal souls of the people who were there. They believe he went and preached to the dead. But there is no immortal soul that lives on after death. It's not a matter that the body dies and the soul lives on. Believing that is an error in judgment, and it cheapens the death of Jesus Christ. The condition of the dead is to await the resurrection in the grave. Ecclesiastes says that the dead know nothing. The dead have no consciousness. And to say that they do undermines the plan of God and the sacrifice of Christ. Adam and Eve were condemned to death for eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:17 says, "For in the day that you eat of it, in dying, you shall surely die." We bring the penalty of death upon ourselves by following the way of Adam and Eve, the way of selfishness. And the wages of sin is death. So if the soul lives on after death, have we truly died? If so, what need is there for a sacrifice of sin? We can just pay that debt ourselves. And if the soul lives on after the death of the body, did Christ really die for us? And if Jesus did not really die, but went on to preach to those who were in hell, then the penalty for sin had not been paid for. But the truth is, and the obvious answer is, Jesus did die. He paid the penalty for all of us. To ignore the penalty for sin and the payment required, or to even just set it aside, would make God unjust and cheapen the sacrifice of Christ. But since Jesus Christ actually died, he could not have preached to these spirit beings while he was in the grave. Nor can these spirits refer to any human being, alive or dead. But this must refer to beings on a spiritual plane of existence. Secondly, these spirits were disobedient. Satan led about a third of the angels in rebellion against God Most High, and God defeated them and cast them to the earth. Thirdly, they were put in prison because of their disobedience. This can only be one group, the demons. Where did this preaching occur? It's clear that this preaching occurred in prison, where these spirits are being detained. The word for prison means jail, a place of detention, a cage, a place where people are under watch. The angels that rebelled were put into a place of restraint. Let's go over to Jude. Jude, it's only one chapter. We're going to read verse 6. Jude 1:6. And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, they left the earth where they were assigned to administer God's government. He has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of that great day. The demons rebelled against God Most High and were cast down to the earth. As a result, they've been confined to this earth. They're not free to go anywhere and do anything. They were placed in a condition of restraint. Satan and his demons walk about this earth, going to and fro on it, and walking back and forth. Satan and his demons remain on this earth, but they're limited in only being able to do what God allows them to do. Back to 1 Peter. 1 Peter 3. Verse 19 also seems to indicate that this preaching occurred in the spirit realm. Jumping in the middle of verse 18, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by which, the Greek is neutral here, referring back to the Spirit, by which also he went and preached. Jesus Christ preached by the Spirit. Because he's preaching to spirit beings and not human beings or immortal souls, this could have easily taken place in the spirit realm. When did Christ preach to the spirits in prison? There exists no reliable source or record preserved in history of this encounter other than what we read in 1 Peter 3. These verses are the only account given of this interaction. But verse 20 makes it clear when this happened. It says, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared. The word Jesus Christ preached to Satan and the demons during the days of Noah, during the time while the ark was being prepared. So what was the content of Christ's message to these spirit beings? The word translated preached in verse 19 is kerusso. The word was used in secular Greek of an official announcement or proclamation made by representative of a government. The word itself does not indicate the content of the message. A qualifying phrase is needed for that purpose. For example, preach the gospel. Therefore, We cannot say what the content of Christ's preaching was. Jesus Christ, the Word, the spokesperson, as a representative of the government of God, made some official proclamation to these rebellious angels at this time, at the time of Noah. And while his proclamation to these rebellious angels who were restrained and confined to this earth may be a mystery, God's intention and work in the lives of mankind are clearly evident. And Satan, the adversary, and the demons bore witness to this. Genesis chapter 6. It was a time when the world was reaching a level of violence, hatred, and chaos that God would not allow to go on any longer. Starting in verse 5. Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Dropping down to verse 11, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Mankind had become so corrupt, so rebellious, so violent. God brought the flood to destroy all those people, not because he hated them, but because he loved them. Had things been allowed to continue, the corruption would have continued to spread and only gotten worse and worse. This was the world that the demons' influence had produced, and their influence continues today, with Satan as the god of this age, blinding the minds of mankind, and the demons working to lead mankind in disobedience. Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians 2, starting in verse 1. And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit which now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others. The world today is following the same path of rebellion and disobedience, leading to corruption and wickedness. And as shown by the pre-flood world and those rebellious angels, that way of life leads to bondage, corruption, violence, and eventually judgment and destruction. Verse 4. But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, just as Noah found grace in the eyes of God. Verse 10, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So those disobedient spirit beings are still confined to this earth today, and we are to battle and wrestle against those demonic influences. And just as Noah did in his day, condemn the world, the ways of this world, and become an heir of righteousness, which is according to faith.